Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be. I am Lot, back again with the usual suspects, Pip and Jake.
Hello.
Gentlemen, last week, Mibs. We took a little look at the folklore, stories that surround the Men in Black. We heard about Albert Bender being followed and visited. We talked about that Mib making a coin disappear. We talked about the experiences that John Keel had. In your guys' opinion, what was the most convincing thing you heard last week?
You take this one.
Convincing?
Yeah.
I don't know what convinces me the most is the problem. I think the guy stopping his newsletter. That's a form of like the last publication of like, hey, for reasons I cannot say, it's all true, but I have to stop. That seems extremely credible.
I'd agree with that.
I think it's the most believable one there.
It's fair. So, the week before that, we did the Hopkinsville Goblins, with that group of entities terrorizing a farmhouse in Kentucky. This week, let's head over to beautiful Utah to hear about Skinwalker Ranch.
Taking a walk around the skin.
I have no idea what this is, dude.
No idea. Pip, you ever heard about Skinwalker Ranch?
I have heard of it. I know little. I know it's got skinwalkers. I know it's a ranch. I know it's fucked up.
So, like, I know what a skinwalker is. I also know what a ranch is. But I don't know what the Skinwalker Ranch is all about.
Well, they don't ranch skinwalkers, thank God.
Dude.
Oh,
like
dear
the
God,
ranch doesn't ranch dudes.
Skinwalker Ranch.
Sorry, that one really got me. Slipped under my radar.
I'll take it.
Skinwalker Ranch, formerly Sherman Ranch, is a beautiful piece of land located smack in the middle of Utah's Uintah Basin. It's a little bit southeast of Salt Lake City. They don't ranch any Shermans. Cool Ranch Shermans.
Free range organic Shermans.
How do you ranch cool though, Doritos? Tell me.
It's a good question.
They've all got sunglasses on when they do it.
Yeah, it's a requirement.
Yeah.
Skinwalker Ranch borders the Ute Reservation, which, if my understanding of the regional history is correct, means that it was once firmly in the middle of the Ute Reservation. The Utes were relocated there there by the American government in 1880, and the land in the reservation just shrank over time because the government just kept taking chunks out of it with no pay or anything. They were just like, no, and actually this is ours too.
Yeah, they keep doing that. I think that's kind of a historical...
That's what they do, dude.
Consistency.
Yeah. I read a lot of stories about what the Ute believe regarding the ranch being in the path of the Skinwalker, hence the name, but I haven't found anything confirming this. I've never read a post or an article by a Ute tribes person confirming this, even obliquely.
In the path makes it sound as though they are migratory in some way.
Right? The stories that I've read, though, involve a curse being placed on the Ute by the Navajo because the Utes were raiding them and taking them as slaves and stuff during the long walk of the Navajo. To answer the incipient question before it gets asked, not about the long walk of the Navajo, which I will get in, but let me just break down real quick what a skinwalker is. Or at least like what we know from hearsay.
What's a skinwalker?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. A skinwalker. In the Navajo DNA, this is Yi-Nadlushi, or Yi-Nagloshi, is a harmful witch. They're associated with physical transformations into coyotes and other tricksters by donning their skins, but can also possess living animals or people by locking eyes with them. I read that it's taboo in Navajo culture to wear the skin of a predator for this reason.
Fuck.
So when they wear skins, it's like deer hide and buckskin. The eyes, by the way, it says that they can possess animals and people by locking eyes. The eyes are always human and glow red in the dark, and it's supposedly one of the ways to tell that an animal isn't actually an animal.
It has red eyes.
Other power.
Glowing red eyes?
Yeah, in the dark, the eyes glow red. But if you just saw it in the daylight, it would have like human eyes in an animal face.
Do you think this is like the sort of origin of the spooky glowing red eyes in the dark? Or do you think that was kind of more like...
I think that's like a pretty universal thing that's
in
associated
the
with
human
that
consciousness.
Shit, right?
Yeah. I was just wondering if there's any like tieable lore to that, like historical etymology, I think is the word.
No. Overall, I think that's just a result of people's growing fears around seeing predators' eyes reflecting in the night watching them.
Yeah.
That's valid. That makes sense.
Other powers that skinwalkers are purported to have are extreme speed, super strength, the ability to turn into a streak or orb of light and color and flash away, and a drawing of power from fear. They've been known to peer in windows and knock on walls to elicit a fear response from the inhabitants of the building. It's why it's frowned on to discuss them with outsiders or teach people about them, like we are doing right now.
So you spread the fear, you spread the power, basically. Okay.
Yeah, you're feeding them. A skinwalker, in a lot of ways, it's the antithesis of the traditional Navajo, Apache, Hopi, or Ute shaman. Where a shaman heals and blesses and communes with nature, a skinwalker harms and curses and defiles. They kill for greed or for spite or for fun. This practice is known as the witchery way, and it involves a lot of human corpses that they use to perform their magic. They grind up bones to make corpse dust, which is an important reagent in some of their spells.
Oh yeah, that ties back to our first episode when we had that particularly weird possible werewolf sighting.
Yeah. A skinwalker it's a shaman gone wrong. All shamans learn something of good magic and evil magic, but sometimes a shaman can't resist the temptation and practices like the dark magic.
You're saying it's a dark shaman.
Just say no. Just say no to black magic.
I spent 14 months in Siege of Obermeyer. I know all about this.
Nerd. This practice becomes a dependency, and a skinwalker will actually die if it stops killing for too long.
Like a shark.
It's interesting. Yeah. Like refuel, dude.
Yeah. Much like what I said about the French peasants living hard times back in our werewolf episode.
Yeah.
There was a resurgence of the practice in the 1870s due to hard living conditions. The government had taken all of the Navajo land early in the decade. And then, this is the long walk of the Navajo, they forced them to walk to another state to live on awful, barren, godforsaken land. A ton of Navajo died on this walk. I'm talking like 80% of their population. They had insufficient food rations, water rations, little to no medical care, no protection from the incursions and raids of other tribes, which they were told they would have. They were like, don't worry, like we'll escort you to this other area, the military will protect you. But the Utes and other groups were just taking the Navajo as slaves, and no one was doing anything about it. Hence the curse.
Fucking hell, dude.
Dude, I read an instance of a pregnant woman being executed because she went into labor and couldn't keep up with the rest of the crowd. So the soldiers were just like, all right, get it done. Bam. Move on. Like, hideous.
That's pretty metal,
yikes.
dude.
Is that the Trail of Tears, or is that a different horrible incident?
That's a different horrible incident and area.
Oh,
This is called the
cool.
Long Walk of the Navajo. So they spent 4 years in their new home before the government admitted that it had fucked up and allowed the Navajo to return to their original lands. But when they returned, in the possessions of some of them, the Navajo found a copy of the Treaty of 1868, where they had ceded the land, wrapped around some witchery tools, and this discovery set off a purge. 40 Navajo were killed for being suspected witches by the rest of the tribesmen to try to restore harmony and balance. I feel like it's a reasonable assumption that this kind of lifestyle would really flourish in hard times. And when you get stuck in a land that can't sustain you, the ability to give yourself a fur coat and hunt your own dinner without weapons is probably pretty appealing.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Powerful black magic and a desperate person makes for this kind of exact thing.
Yeah, something dark side, dude.
Yeah, I think it's just interesting to note kind of the resurgence during the bad times here, and then in kind of 18th century France, when things were bad, you see a rash of werewolf sightings. And maybe it's just general fear and panic that kind of wells up and overflows. Or maybe it is some kind of weird transformation thing.
Makes sense.
What? How does this tie to the Wendigo? This similar, or is it another name?
It's different. A Wendigo is a spirit of hunger that possesses someone, as opposed to just being like.
Oh, okay,
witch.
so it's not like a shaman. It's more of like a possession.
Oh yeah, a Wendigo is basically like kind of analogous to like a demon,
Okay.
where like it can possess someone and make them do horrible things.
This is more free will, but still evil.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
like a shaman gone wrong.
Phenomena.
Modern day stories about skinwalkers still pop up all across the southwestern U.S. I remember a really awesome story of a trucker rolling down a New Mexico highway, and he looks out the window to see a coyote that's running down the highway in the opposite lane, keeping up with his truck and just staring at the driver intensely with these bright green eyes, just staring in the window, just running 120 down the highway.
That's at the point that you try and run that thing off the road, right? Because I mean, I don't think a skinwalker can take a semi if you just veer a little to the side and clip him.
What happens if you brake check him?
Good question.
just tap your brakes and just see what happens.
What if it catches you though? What if that's the plan?
I mean, in this instance though, the weight of the truck is going to help you, because the truck is going to
It's a good
have
point.
a better time kind of stopping under its own weight. Whereas if the coyote tries to stop like that, it's just going to like go flipping end over end down the highway.
Yeah, it's got a more inertia for that too, I guess.
Yeah.
All the stopping power gets put right back into the skinwalker.
Yeah, brake pads are really great, and coyotes don't have them. But there's all kinds of stories of animals acting wrong, of houses being assailed by knocking noises from the outside. I found a story of a sheep. A guy heard his sheep freaking out. He walked outside, and there was a sheep on its hind legs that was laughing in like a human laugh.
That's fucking
That's
scary.
And he looks at it, and it stops laughing, and it looks at him. And then it just turns and walks away on its two legs and climbs out of the pen and just wanders off into the woods.
Ooh, you see that? Yeah, that would promote fear and power for the skinwalker,
Yeah.
wouldn't it? Would work on me.
That's fucked up.
I found
dude.
one from. Yeah, buddy.
That
I found
also-
one from the 80s. A family's driving through the Navajo reservation when a black hairy being that was wearing a shirt and pants jumped out of the ditch at them as they slowed to make a sharp curve. And they sped away, but a couple of days later, outside their home in Flagstaff, Arizona, they were awoken to the sounds of loud drumming and chanting. They looked outside and saw 3 dark humanoid forms outside their fence, staring at the house.
3 is particularly scary.
Yeah, they seemed unable to climb the fence or open the gate, and soon left.
Threshold?
Seems like it.
I had heard one story. I don't remember where, but it was I think it was a guy who had like a cabin nearby the Skinwalker Ranch or something, and or like his dad had a cabin nearby, and so he took all his friends there to just like drink and spend the night, and they were just wandering around the dark. And at one point there was one more person in among them than there was when they started the night. There was like knocking, and they started losing people into the woods there, like hearing their friends call for them, and their friend is like right there, and like scary shit like that.
Yeah, it's probably the most
not doing
terrifying thing, dude.
I'm not doing it justice, but the fact that they are intelligent and can deceive is pretty scary as well.
Yeah, people are spooky.
Yeah.
I found another story from an unnamed reservation around Christmas in the neighborhood 20 years ago. A guy was home by himself when he hears the cows freaking out, like any good country lad. He grabs a shotgun, grabs his boots, heads out to see what the hell's happening, and he sees two dogs just outside the cattle enclosure. And they're like up on their hind legs with their front legs kind of tangled as they bite and snap at one another. You know, dogs fighting.
Yeah.
So he racks the gun. But before he can even raise the gun to his shoulder, because he's thinking, like, this one's a twofer, right? Like, look at them, they're holding each other. This is an easy shot. Before he can even raise it to his shoulder, the two dogs stop fighting. They look at him. Then they separate and run away still on their hind legs. They just, like, truck at him.
Like, the most weird part about all these stories is always just, like, the animals walking on their hind legs. Like, that's so unnatural. That's fucked up, dude.
That's what I was gonna say. It's like, it's just so unnatural.
Yeah.
The one where the sheep was just like standing and laughing reminds me again of the werewolf episode where we had the supposed picture of the werewolf, where it did look more like a sheep kind of just standing.
True.
Yeah, just running.
Yeah.
To return to my explanation of the history of the ranch itself, we covered the Long Walk to the Navajo, we covered what a skinwalker is. Back to the ranch. Around 1906, I found a news article discussing strange underground rumblings that occurred around the ranch at all hours of the day and night. So, I present to you, in full, the article in question. There's a little part of me that I know this was written in 1906, so I kind of want to read this in like a transatlantic accent, but I will spare you.
No,
that.
nail it. Do it.
Many residents of Utah and the East who have been in the Uintah Basin since Election Day examining lands that they purchased at the Provo government sale have noticed with wonder the occasional rumblings resembling explosions or distant thunder that can be heard throughout the section at intervals every calm day and night.
I love this.
Was that, Jake? Is that too bad? Is that too painful?
No, this is fantastic.
It was spot on. It's just
I'm
funny, dude.
insanely on board for this.
There has been much speculation as to the nature or cause of the phenomenon, and various theories have been advanced, some more or less fanciful or imaginary. Homesteaders have heard these muffled detonations every quiet day since the former Uintah Indian Reservation was opened to settlement over 5 years ago, and have become so familiar with them that they have long since ceased to pay any attention to what seems most unusual or alarming to strangers. From the fact that the mysterious noise is heard just as frequently in winter as in summer, and that the volume of sound remains almost constant from the beginning to the end of the 5 to 15 seconds it lasts, and that there are never any single isolated reports, the explanation of distant thunder or blasts have been abandoned. In all probability, the rumbling is simply the slipping of one layer of rock over another at some place along the Uintah Fault, which extends over 100 miles north and south along the base of the Wasatch Mountains, near the western boundary of the Uintah Basin. This is really hard to keep up over like an entire article. Like, I feel like an auctioneer.
Yeah,
You're nailing it, though.
Dude, I'll be honest, I'm not listening to what you're saying, I'm just listening to how you're talking.
I am enthralled.
You got kind of like English there for a second, though. It was weird.
It's tough to hold on to. It's really tight in the throat.
I believe it.
It feels like like an old tube radio, and you can see like the glow from inside, and you're just hearing this like urgent report.
In accord with this theory is the fact that while, as a general rule, the rumblings heard at Theodore or on the Blue Bench come apparently from the northwest in the direction of Blacktail Mountain, Stockmore, or Park City, they frequently are more westerly towards Heber City or Provo, and occasionally seem to proceed from the southwest in the direction of Soldier Summit. Settlers, who have gone to the sawmills in the mountains 20 or 30 miles distant from here, state that the noise there is much louder and is accompanied by distinct tremors of the earth. There is no uncommon thing for a new homesteader awakened in the dead of night by an alarming uproar and shaking of dishes and other articles in the cabin to take his blankets and retreat out of doors to spend the rest of the night under the stars, which he does not fear may tumble down upon him at any moment. Aside from such loss of sleep, no damage has been known to result from the earthquakes. It is likely that, if scientific observations could be taken by the government or University of Utah, many additions could be made to mankind's rather limited knowledge of the movements of the crust of the earth.
Well done, dude. Well done.
Thank you.
Applause.
I took drama in high school.
Oh man, you know what? It really makes it sound like the old like radio newscasters and stuff. It sounds like it would actually be pretty exhausting to keep that voice up.
I can't imagine how they did that for an entire like broadcast
Yeah,
and stuff.
for real.
I mean, up until now, I just thought people just talk like that.
No.
Maybe it was maybe it was just a bit.
I'm sure like someone. Yeah, it had to come from somewhere, right? So whether it was exaggerated or not, like I'm sure like someone.
Although in hindsight, I guess I assume it wouldn't make sense for like newscasters to always talk like that too either.
Yeah, yeah.
We come to you now from the kitchen, honey. What would you like for dinner?
With all that info, talking about like the sounds just being the rumblings of the crust of the earth, I looked it up, and after a lot of sifting through search results, I found it. Technical report number 67-46, operations of the Uintah Basin Seismological Observatory, quarterly report number 5, May 1st through July 31st, 1967. Confirming... Yeah, it's probably just the sound of the Earth's crust shifting.
Well, that may also... If it's just the Earth's crust shifting, that may contribute to the mythology of the area, right? Like the area, the land is cursed. You can feel it move every so often.
The land was lived on by John and Emma Myers, who set up a small homestead on the ranch around 1905. Now, the Myers don't really have a lot to report. Their neighbors, however, do. The Locke family lived on the western portion of the land, and I found claims that the Lockes would talk about receiving an unusual visitor. A person appeared on their farm requesting some water. He was wearing regular clothes, but when he moved they could see a shiny blue outfit underneath. The strange man had a lengthy conversation with the family, including some stuff about not digging on the land, and then he leaves. And this story was interesting enough that it was kind of passed on through the family.
Interesting.
Eventually,
you gotta be a really weird dude to make to become part of a family's like mythology and spoken history.
Yeah.
That's something to aspire to, I think.
I don't know about that one.
This one time I saw this guy on the street, his hat was huge. I'll never forget him.
This is a 5,000-gallon hat. I didn't know they sold those.
Man, looked like he could just live in the hat.
Hi, I'm Doug Dimmadome, owner of the Dimsdale Dimmadome.
Oh no. Listen, I feel like I would also not forget Doug Dimmadome, owner of the Doug Dimmadome, owner of the Dimsdale Dimmadome, if I were to meet him.
Yeah, I'd stick out in your mind.
Hell, I still remember him.
In the 1950s and 60s, we get a UFO flap in the area with a lot of reports in the Uintah Basin. Like a lot. The ridge line behind the basin, made of red rock, is locally named Werewolf Ridge for reasons totally lost to history. No one knows. That's just what everyone that lives there calls it. It's Werewolf Ridge.
I mean, I could make a guess.
Yeah. In 1981, NASA builds an observatory a mere 16 miles northeast of the ranch.
I guess werewolves.
Only 8 years later, this was dismantled. In 1994, Edith Myers passed away, and with the last of the family owners deceased, a brother-in-law of theirs sold the ranch to Terry and Gwen Sherman, cattle ranchers who were looking for a large parcel of land. They got the land at a sweetheart rate and promptly moved in with their family and livestock. But it got really weird really quick, because they moved all their cattle in, which was like a prized breeding herd. These were extremely expensive cattle. They move in, and they find that all of the doors and windows have deadbolts on them. All of them. Even the doors inside the house. Some doors had a deadbolt on either side. Even the kitchen cabinets were bolted. They had 2 large iron stakes with chains that were planted at either end of the house. That they figured were probably for like a guard dog or 2. They figured maybe 1 or 2 dogs, and then, the sun would move and they would switch them to the other side of the house so that they could be in the shade. Like keep them in the shade by maybe switching chains. Later they found out that no, the people who lived there had 4 giant dogs, 2 at either side of the house at all times.
Yeah, I think
As you do.
the bolting of the kitchen cabinets is a little excessive here.
Well, speaking from the old broadcast, was they were talking about like dishes and everything like clattering off of shelves during the quakes, right? So
Yeah, okay, but
it
like,
might just be to
that's-
keep everything shut.
sure, but I still think it's a little excessive.
That damn Skinwalker ate my fruit snacks.
Yeah, exactly.
He
What
just the Skinwalker comes barreling through the door like Kramer. Just raids
what
the
if-
fridge.
Like, all
What
I'm
if
saying
Edith's
is
husband-
if the Skinwalker's breaking into your fucking house, right? Like, I think you have more things to worry about than him taking some of your plates.
What if Edith's husband was like eating all the Weetabix, and then Edith would want some, and her husband would be like, I
was the
guess that
Skinwalker."
The Skinwalker broke in and ate our Weetabix. I better deadbolt the cabinet shut.
That'll teach him.
Don't
That'll
worry,
get
honey.
'em.
I've got a home renovation project that will solve all our problems.
Was Edith married to Red Green? Can't be. All the doors would be duct tape shut.
Now let's
So-
see it. I bet you that would stick pretty good to his fur.
Probably. So, they get there. Cow's in. They're weirded out by the locks, but it is what it is. They're checking the cattle in their pens. First day there, when the family is approached by this huge beast, like a wolf or a coyote. And at first, they're wary and they're freaked out. But the creature seemed friendly enough. It wasn't, like, scared of people or anything. So they were like, it must be like a local wolf dog. And the kids patted it, and the dog's wagging its tail and having a good time. And the dog meanders closer until it lunges at one of the calves that were in the livestock pen. And it latches onto its nose, and it tries to drag it through the corral bars. Terry...
It sounds as though it may have had some kind of an arrangement with the previous family. If it was just like, oh, people here. Well, I won't
Wait.
attack them. I'm just going to vibe, and then I'm going to take one of these animals. Okay, cool.
So Terry grabs a metal bar, and he tries to beat this thing until it lets go, but it just ignores him. It just clings on to the calf. So finally, Terry pulls out his gun, shoots the creature point blank with a .357 Magnum. No effect. Fires again, and the beast lets go of the calf and turns to just fucking stare at him. He shoots it a couple more times, and the wolf just like turns and trots off calmly. No sign of injury, no blood, nothing. It just, alright, you know what? I'm bored of this. The guys tried to hunt the wolf down, but after a mile, the tracks just vanished.
I feel like people may benefit more from my instinct of when encountering anything of any concern is to talk to it. It's like, hey, what the fuck is that? I hear like a movement in my house. I'm like, what is that? I hear you.
You think that's the play, dude?
If I see a dog, if a wolf is, you shoot it once, it's twice, and it stops and it looks at you. You're like, you know what? Actually, you can have that.
So you
You
just
just
want to ask it,
look at it.
how's your day, dude? What's up? What's up with you? How you been? You want to do that
I
instead?
mean, I'm not gonna ask the. I wouldn't be like sitting down for tea with it, but if, you know, it's a friendly dog, the family's patting it, and like, oh, that's cool. It's weird, but it's cool. And then it goes for an animal, and you shoot it twice, and it seems fine, and it gives you a fucking look. At that point, you're like, hey, bud, you know what? I take it back.
Just
I
go
will say
unlock
out loud, you know what? I take it back. You can keep that. I don't want to pay for the doctors on that animal. That one's yours.
Unlock the door of the corral, pull the calf out, and like give it to the wolf and reshut the corral door and just take your kids inside.
It seems like it's prescient enough to have not conversation, but at least some form of communication. It knew what it was doing, giving you a look after you shot it, and it knew what you were doing trying to shoot it.
Maybe it's just looking at you because you just fucking shot it.
But it wasn't even like mad. It just
It
like,
wasn't
looked
harmed.
like-
It was just like
Bro.
it
Are you done?
it knew that you knew, and then he shot it some more times, and then it was like, all right, fine, deal's off.
But that was just the first instance of weirdness that the Shermans would get. Soon they would begin to see odd depressions in their field, somewhere around 3 foot wide and a foot or two deep, with 3 of them in the ground forming a triangle shape. You'd find these in fields around in the morning. Coinciding with the onset of this phenomena, Terry began having cattle issues. The cows began to die under mysterious circumstances, and like I said, this was a prize breeding herd, so it's not like they just got sick and died or something. It wasn't just a bad herd of cattle.
Right.
Because of this, and that's a lot of money, so Terry develops the habit of checking his cattle a lot more frequently, which led to an evening in April 1995. Terry was checking the cattle when a silent, glowing object passed over a 50-foot tall stand of poplar trees that stood on the edge of one of their fields. Shortly after, Gwen saw another UFO, one that had, she said they were like headlights, except they were extended in front of the vehicle in the sky, and they were so big and bright that they lit up the entire side of the local mountain.
A sun.
Shortly after these viewings, Terry began investigating his dead cattle a little more closely. One cattle had no marks from predators, only a single hole in the center of its left eyeball. Sherman noted a chemical smell and dipped a wire into the hole to see how deep it was, and he claims that the wire easily went in all the way to the center of the brain. A second one was found with the same hole in the left eyeball. Other cattle just went missing, despite all attempts by family and neighbors to locate them. And, like, cows are pretty fucking big. Like, they can't just hide under a bed and be like, oh, where'd they go?
Yeah.
One time, Terry tracked a cow through the snow. But after a couple of miles, the tracks just stopped under some trees at the edge of the property. And surrounding the endpoint of the tracks were broken branches and fallen leaves from overhead.
Was that where the whole, like, aliens abducting cows thing came from? Because I thought we were on Skinwalkers also, but...
Well, it's Skinwalker Ranch. And there's a lot of stuff that happens there. Lights in the sky. Weird crafts. Cattle mutilations. A lot of stuff that we're going to cover next episode when things get really, really weird.
So they got a B&B there, what? Airbnb?
No, I think it's privately owned now. But even that stuff isn't the weirdest shit that happened. The Shermans continued to observe all manner of unusual crafts and cattle mutilations. At one point, one of their cows, they saw it, and it was out grazing in the field, and they were like, hey, buddy, and they, like, dipped their head down to grab some water and, like, drank a glass of water, and then looked back up, and the cow was dead in the field. And they went and checked it out, and it had, like, an 8-inch sample cored out of its rectum.
Oh, Jesus. That got even
They just
more
stole
worse
its ass?
as he went on. Why?
Huh. I don't know. Why would you want cow rectum? That's a good question.
Like, yeah.
Rectum damn near killed him.
What's the purpose? I'm so confused.
Good eats.
I mean,
Yeah.
I guess
We're gonna have
that's
to agree to
easier
disagree on
than
that one, dude.
easier than probing the whole cow is you just take the part you probe.
It's like scientists taking an ice core sample.
Yeah.
Get the core of the animal. We'll figure it out. Even weirder, Terry claims that portals would open up in the sky sometimes. He said we would see these 100-foot circular openings appear in the air. It was like 4 orange-colored doorways would sort of spiral open. Smaller craft would emerge, fly around the property, and then return to the portals and vanish. Even weirder than that, we get phenomena where Terry and his son and nephew heard voices from a nearby pasture. It sounded like a CB radio, like kind of garbled and unintelligible, but coming from empty air. They listened, and they could hear 2 distinct voices speaking. They described the language as choppy sounding, like a cross between Russian and Native American. One voice was deep, and the other was higher pitched. After a bit of this, Terry yelled out, "We can hear you," and the voices went quiet for a moment, before the deep voice let out a bellowing laugh, and the conversation just picked up again.
See, that's why talking to them doesn't make any sense. Because if they could understand you, they just do that shit, dude. 100%. Shoot them.
Just laugh at you?
Yeah, just fucking shoot them, dude. And hope they
The
die.
empty air?
No, okay. Like, you know what I mean.
I mean, listen, Not 100% of the time. I'm not guaranteeing 100% success rate with talking with any unusual encounters, but I don't know. I feel like it's a good idea generally.
Just shoot it.
Yeah, just literally just shoot it.
Or yeah, I mean, wave a stick through the air. Maybe they're invisible.
Okay, but
On
in this
another
specific
plane? I don't
example,
know.
obviously, maybe
In this
don't
specific
shoot it
example.
because there's nothing there. But like, you can just shoot stuff.
I mean, in the previous example, he tried shooting it.
Right.
Didn't work.
A further evening, Gwen saw a formation of lights in a field. She grabbed binoculars, looks out, and saw someone standing in the light. It was a large, man-shaped figure, hulking and heavy-set. Later that evening, the lights returned. Gwen and Terry got a good look at the figure. It was around 7 feet tall in a totally black uniform, and they noticed that it seemed to be wearing like a visor because something shiny was glinting on its face.
Huh.
And finally, the last straw. The family began to notice blue orbs of light moving about the property, giving off a crackling sound, and seeming to move intelligently, going slow and then zipping over to kind of seemingly like inspect something, and then kind of zip over. One night, Terry noticed one spooking his horses, so he heads out to the barn to make it leave.
Get out of here, you weird orb.
You varmint.
Chase it out with a broom.
He shines a flashlight on the thing, which backs up at first, and then zooms right at him. It stops just short of him, and it like inspects him. Terry describes it as a glass ball about the size of a baseball, which had two blue fluids intermingling with each other inside. The ball leaves, but returned a couple hours later, and after a little bit of prompting, the Sherman's 3 dogs gave it chase, snarling and barking as they chased it off the property.
The natural enemy of dogs is ball.
Yeah, the dogs followed it into a wooded area, and the family lost sight of them, and then heard a sharp, piercing yelp. The dogs did not return. The family... Okay, this is... Some people, I think, might come down on the family for this, but, like, let's be real here. This is the smart move. The family's like, you know what? Let's wait until the sun comes up. We'll go check and see if the dogs are okay. I'm not going out into those woods right now in the dark.
Yeah, especially considering all the weirdness.
Yeah. So they go out, and they found a greasy blob the next morning of what seemed like butter or shortening. And it was in like a scorched, blackened ring. And the trees above the scorched ring also had a burned appearance.
Oh my god.
According to Terry, by the way, the grass in that circle grew back, but the tree limbs never did. Those trees died.
The dogs were rendered into fat.
Is that...
Seems like.
That actually what happened? That's fucked up.
That's my understanding of what happened.
How...
Hey, you basically heat something up enough and it turns into
Yeah,
just
but
like
how
large
hot does it have to
rendered.
be? My question.
Pretty damn hot.
Yeah.
To scorch and kill all the nearby trees in just like a ring. They catch one of the balls? Is that what happened? And it just roasted them?
Oh, how should I know?
I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud, really. It's good for the podcast. It's words.
The family had enough. They decided to move. They packed everything up, got the cattle together, and put the kids to bed. Terry and Gwen each had a shower, went to bed, and instantly passed out. They were so tired from all this stress. But they woke up with their bedding covered in blood, each of them missing a small scoop of flesh in the same place on their right thumbs. They wanted to sell, but they didn't really know how to write up an ad for a cursed ranch. But luck was with them. Enter Robert Bigelow, aerospace entrepreneur and fan of the unusual.
It's not his actual last name, is it?
It is. Bigelow Aerospace is his company.
Love this.
He dumped a bunch of money into UFO research and stuff over the years. He purchased the property for less than the Shermans paid for it. The Shermans wanted out of there so bad that they sold this prime land at a loss. and Bigelow began to move his own organization in to investigate. This group, NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery Science. And that is where we end for the week.
Oh, dude.
There is too much to put in one episode. I still haven't covered the scientific investigations, the sightings and happenings made by NIDS, the different beings that are reported as being on the ranch, everything from a mist to a native man that walks around. He seems older and he just stares, he doesn't talk. There's some evil being that seems to be clothed in furs. There's all kinds of stuff. There's like portals. Apparently there's like some kind of spirit that lives underwater, and if you walk by bodies of water, you can hear it calling to you. If you get too close, it'll drown you. All kinds of crazy stuff.
I'm still mad at you for leaving it right there.
A good cliffhanger. I will respect that. I am also very frustrated. Although, I guess the selling of the land at a loss to a millionaire does seem a little Scooby-Doo.
It is a little Scooby-Doo. I agree with that.
That is the recurring plot line of Scooby-Doo.
I mean, I don't think Bigelow set it up. I just think it's a testament to how bad the Shermans wanted the fuck out of there.
I mean, probably, but also there's just a little part of me that's like, well, I mean, he would have the resources for such a.
But it was
Hoodwink.
Old Man Bigelow. We should have known.
I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you and your rotten dogs. I had to vaporize your dogs to almost get away with it.
It's so insane. How, like, I can't. Alright. I'm Googling it right now. How hard does it have to be to turn animals into fat? So, roughly 54 to 60 degrees Celsius. What?
Wow, that's hot. Well,
that's not right.
Fats begin to liquefy.
That's what fats begin to liquefy.
Melts at a lower temperature than fat melts at a lower temperature than meat burns.
Okay. What am I actually looking for? Not that. That is not it.
How hot does it have to burn to vaporize a body?
A body burns much.
Also?
It would flash it though, right? To flash
You'd think
burn
the
it?
fat would. Generally, the fat's the first thing.
Yeah. That's. I don't know how to actually find the answer to this question.
So there would be some different
adipose
chemical
tissue.
properties. Maybe it wasn't a heat flash. But then why was everything burned?
One thing I feel comfortable asserting is that whatever it was came from overhead, like with the cattle that was missing, and the end of its tracks were surrounded by like broken branches and leaves.
Sure.
Because it was like a cylinder, right?
And the second thing I'll say is that a lot of different types of energy that aren't heat will release heat as a byproduct, right?
Yeah.
So the scorched stuff around could be something else. Or like could just be a byproduct, and the beam itself is something else.
Just a beam that turns everything into fat. No science here.
It's just
I mean, maybe it broke down everything into just like a general organic mush.
Ooh, maybe. Because they just said they.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it's just because because where would the bones go, right?
Yeah.
And the teeth. Everything.
They just said that it looked like butter or shortening. They didn't say anything about texture or anything. They just said that it looked like a lump of butter or shortening. I mean, a bunch of lumps.
Rookie mistake.
A butter or shortening or lard is kind of just a general organic mush, in a way.
Go into the woods and there's just a scorched circle in some piles of like butter-looking substance where your dogs used to be. Terry's like, Gwen, go get the Wonder Bread and a butter knife. I gotta find it. I gotta know. I gotta know what happened.
You'll
the
never
Wonder
get that
Bread.
opportunity ever again in your life, dude.
They were good dogs.
Listeners, would you eat the mysterious dog butter?
Would you eat the hot dogs?
Okay.
Butter dog.
But that's it for tonight.
Thanks for also coming along. For the dogs.
Thanks for coming along with us on this wild ride, and join us next week for the conclusion. come chat us up on Twitter at OOTA_pod or our YouTube, which is Out of the Abyss Podcast. We have a Patreon with a special offer for the next month. Signing up at any tier, including the $1 tier, will get you an episode dedication, full episode dedicated to you, as well as all of the other benefits. Thank you all, and remember, everything has an element of the unknown. Good night.